Good day everyone! Welcome back to another video lesson in Mathematics 10. By the way, I am Lilibet Tisapnay, a student teacher taking a Bachelor of Secondary Education major in Mathematics of Holy Trinity College of Camarines Sur. In this video lesson, we are going to prove geometric properties using distance formula. Let us start knowing about this. Let us consider triangle ABC with coordinates A, the quantity of -3, -2, B, the quantity of -1, 3, and C, the quantity of 1, -2. Show that triangle ABC is isosceles triangle. So, ano nga ba tong isosceles triangle na kailangan nating ma-prove? In our geometry, we say that isosceles triangle is a triangle with two congruent sides. So, ibig sabihin, dapat mapatunayan natin na kapag ginamit natin ang distance formula, may dalawang side ng triangle na magiging parehas ng sukat. So, let's start in illustrating it. So, in point A, we have -3, -2. In point B, we have -1, 3. And in point C, we have 1, -2. Based on our given, when we connect that, yan yung triangle natin na papatunayan kung siya ba ay isosceles triangle. So, aalamin natin ang distance ng bawat side ng triangle. So, dahil distance yung aalamin natin, gagamitin natin ang distance formula para mahanap ito, which is the D equals the square root of the quantity of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus the quantity of y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. So, by substitution, unahin na nating alamin ang distance ng A and B. So, ito yung magiging sagot kapag nag-substitute tayo. So, we'll let us this -3 as x sub 2, -1 as x sub 1, then -2 as y sub 2, and 3 as y sub 1. So, ito na yung magiging sagot kapag nag-substitute tayo. And perform the operation, we have -3 minus the quantity of -1 squared. So, change the sign of subtrahend plus the quantity of -2 minus 3 squared. So, the result will be the square root of the quantity of -2 squared plus the quantity of -5 squared. Pag in-squared ang -2 and -5, we have the answer, the square root of 4 plus 25. So, pag inad itong dalawa, we have the result of the square root of 29. So, itong square root of 29, ito na yung distance ng ating A and B. So, nakuha na natin yung una, alamin naman natin yung pangalawang side. So, how about this one? The distance of CB. So, sinubstitute na natin yung 1 as x sub 2 and negative 1 as x sub 1, then negative 2 as y sub 2, and 3 as y sub 1. So, we have this. Then, perform the operation. So, 1 minus the quantity of negative 1 squared is 2 squared plus negative 2 minus 3 squared is negative 5 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, the result is the square root of 4 plus 25. And when we add that, we have the result of the square root of 29. So, dito sa dalawang side ng triangle, nakuha na natin yung distance. And the distance of AB is equal to the distance of CB. So, it implies that AB is congruent to CB, which describe the definitions of isosceles triangles. Hence, the triangle ABC is isosceles triangle because two congruent sides ang ipinakita natin. Ito yung AB and CB. So, ang tanong, baka sabihin nyo yung isang side hindi natin kinuha, itong A and C. Maya-maya baka parehas lang ng sukat. So, kung titingnan natin itong distance ng A and C, horizontal naman siya, di ba? So, bibilangin na lang natin. So, we have 1, starting dito sa point A, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, 4 ang distance from A to C. So, iba siya dun sa dalawa. Kaya naman talagang siya ay isosceles triangle. So, let's have another example. So, consider the quadrilateral LOVE has coordinates L, the quantity of negative 5, negative 2, O, the quantity of negative 2, 2, V, the quantity of 2, negative 1, and E, the quantity of negative 1, negative 5. Show that the diagonal of quadrilateral LOVE is congruent. So, alam naman natin na kapag sinabing quadrilateral, 4 na side na polygon. So, i-illustrate muna natin para malaman natin alin ba yung diagonal na pag-uusapan natin. So, let's have this one. So, in point L, we have negative 5, negative 2. Sa point O, we have negative 2, 2. In point V, we have 2, negative 1. And in point E, we have negative 1, negative 5. So, pag kinonect natin, ayan na yung quadrilateral na pag-uusapan natin. So, ito na siya. Pero kailangan nating ma-prove or maipakita ay yung diagonal ay congruent. So, pag sinabing diagonal, ito yung from O to E and L to V. So, yan yon. So, yan ang aalamin natin ang distance. Kailangan at the end maging parehas sila. Okay, gamit ulit ang distance formula. Alamin na natin si OE. So, ito na yung ating negative 1 as x sub 2, negative 2 as x sub 1, then negative 5 as y sub 2, and the 2 is the y sub 1. So, perform the operation. We have negative 1 minus the quantity of negative 2 squared plus the quantity of negative 5 minus 2 squared. So, the result is the square root of the quantity of 1 squared plus the quantity of negative 7 squared. Then, kapag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the result of the square root of 1 plus 49. So, pag in-add natin to, we have the square root of 50. So, itong the square root of 50 na to, pwede natin siyang i-simplify. So, the square root of 50 is 5 times the square root of 2. Kasi yung 50, pwede natin siyang i-simplify as 25 times 2. And the square root of 25 is 5. So, the square root of 50 is equal to 5 times the square root of 2. So, nakuha na natin yung OE, itong OE distance. So, dito naman tayo sa distance ng LV. Sana yung makuha natin dito na sagot ay pareho ng sa OE para masabi natin sila ay congruent. So, let's come now to the distance of LV. So, we have the 2 as x sub 2, negative 5 as x sub 1, then negative 1 as y sub 2, and negative 2 as y sub 1. So, perform the operation. 2 minus the quantity of negative 5 squared plus the quantity of negative 1 minus the quantity of negative 2 squared. We have the result of the square root of the quantity of 7 squared plus the quantity of 1 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the results of the square root of 49 plus 1. So, pag in-add ang 49 plus 1, the result is the square root of 50. So, pag sinimplify natin itong square root of 50, we have 5 times the square root of 2. Hence, OE is equal to LV. Or the distance of OE is equal to the distance of LV. Hence, it implies OE is congruent to LV. So, therefore, the diagonal of the quadrilateral is congruent. Okay, let's proceed to to the next. Triangle DEF has coordinates D, the quantity of 1, 1, E, the quantity of -3, 5, and F, the quantity of 1, 5. Show that the triangle DEF is an isosceles right triangle. So, in this case, we will try to prove that the triangle DEF is isosceles right triangle. Ang isosceles dapat two sides ay congruent. At ang right triangle, ang isang angle ay 90 degree. So, dahil concentrated lang tayo sa distance formula, ang pwede natin gamitin para mapatunayan ang right triangle ay gagamitan natin ng Pythagorean theorem, which is the C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Alamin natin kung paano ito gamitin. And let us illustrate it first. So, we have point D. We have 1, 1. Point E, we have -3, 5. And point F, we have 1, 5. So, connecting the point. So, yan yung papatunayan natin kung siya ba ay isosceles right triangle. So, syempre, ang distance formula, gamit ang distance formula, aalamin natin ang distance ng tatlong sides na to, ng triangle na ito. So, unahin na natin CEF. CEF from E to F. So, let's substitute the -3 as x sub 2, 1 as x sub 1, then 5 as y sub 2, and 5 as y sub 1. So, perform the operation. We have the square root of the quantity -3 minus 1 squared plus the quantity of 5 minus 5 squared. The result is the square root of the quantity -4 squared plus 0 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the result of the square root of 16. Kasi yung -4 squared is positive 16. So, ito yung namang 0 squared is 0. So, we have a square root of 16. So, the square root of 16 is 4. So, the distance from E to F is 4. So, how about the distance from F to D? So, we have from FD, the value of x sub 2 is 1, the value of x sub 1 is 1, then the value of y sub 2 is 5, and the value of y sub 1 is 1. So, ito naman yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon. So, performing the operations, we have the quantity of 1 minus 1 squared plus the quantity of 5 minus 1 squared. So the result is the square root of the quantity 0 squared plus 4 squared. So pag in-squared ulit natin itong dalawa, we have the result of the square root of 16. Kasi yung 0 squared is 0 na naman. So the square root of 16 is also 4. So, mapapansin natin yung distance ng EF is equal to the distance of FD. It implies that EF is congruent to FD. Pero yung totoo, pwede naman nating bilangin na lang siya from here, yung sa EF, E from F, diba? Kaya bilangan na lang natin siya, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, 14 yung distance. Kasi horizontal naman. And dito naman sa FD, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So, tumama naman siya dun sa computation natin. Dahil ang dalawang sides niya ay equal, so ibig sabihin ito ay isosceles na ang triangle nito. Pero hindi hanggang ganun lang. Kailangan mapatunayan natin na isosceles right triangle siya. Saka may isa pang side na kailangan nating kuhanan ng sukat. So, baka pag kinumpute natin yan, maging parehas pa yung sagot. Hindi siya magiging isosceles right triangle kapag pare-parehas yung sukat nila. So, let us see it kung ano yung magiging distance nitong ED na to. So, sa ED, we have negative 3 as x sub 2, 1 as x sub 1, then 5 as y sub 2, and 1 as y sub 1. So, pag pinreform the operation, we have the square root of the quantity of negative 3 minus 1 squared plus the quantity of 5 minus 1 squared. We have the results of the square root of the quantity of negative 4 squared plus the quantity of 4 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the results of the square root of 16 plus 16. So, pag in-add natin to, we have the results of the square root of 32. Then, we can simplify this. So, the square root of 32 is 4 times the square root of 2. Kasi yung 32, pwede natin siyang i-simplify as 16 times 2. So, the square root of 16 is 4. So, the square root of 32 is 4 times the square root of 2. So, kung mapapansin natin, iba talaga yung sukat niya dun sa dalawang nauna. Kaya, na-prove na talagang isosceles. So, ngayon, i-prove naman natin kung right triangle para maging isosceles right triangle itong triangle DEF. So, sabi ko nga kanina, gamit ang Pythagorean theorem. So, in Pythagorean theorem, we have the formula of c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So, yung ating ED, siya yung magiging C natin. Kasi ito yung longest side. So, yung A and B, yan naman yung EF, ito, and the FD. So, to substitute, we have the quantity of 4 times the square root of 2 squared, siya yung ED squared. Then, the quantity of 4 squared, siya naman yung EF squared. At yung 4 squared, siya naman yung FD squared. So, itong 2 exponent, i-distribute sa 4, kaya magiging 16. So, pag ito namang pag-distribute sa square root of 2, magiging 2. So, dito naman sa 4 squared, syempre 16. And another one is 4 squared is 16. So, we arrive from this. So, pag pinperform natin ito, mapuprove natin na this is 32 equals 32. So, at dahil the triangle is right because sides is satisfy the Pythagorean theorem relations. So, napatunayan natin na prove. So, ibig sabihin yan, kanina na-prove natin na isosceles. Ito naman na-prove natin na siya ay right triangle. So, okay. Let's proceed to the next. How about quadrilateral CARE has coordinate C, the quantity of negative 2, 1, A, the quantity of 3, 6, R, the quantity of 4, negative 1, and E, the quantity of negative 1, negative 6. Show that quadrilateral CARE is rhombus. So, rhombus naman ang kailangan nating ma-prove. Pag pinag-uusapan ang rhombus, ito ay quadrilateral din na ang mga sides ay congruent. So, 4 na sides na ang magiging sides na dapat ay congruent. So, dapat nating mapatunayan na magiging parehas yung mga sides nila. So, i-illustrate na natin siya. So, in point C, we have negative 2, 1. In point A, we have 3, 6. Sa point R, we have 4, negative 1. And sa point E, we have negative 1, negative 1. So, connecting the point, yan, may ano na tayo, may 4-sided polygon siya. So, quadrilateral ito. So, papatunayan natin na ito ay rhombus by getting the distance of its side. So, CA, AR, so ito yung CA, AR, RE, and EC. Okay, so unahin na natin si CA. Siyempre, galing sa distance formula. So, we have the CA equals, so the square root of the value of x sub 2 is 3, and the value of x sub 1 is negative 2, then the value of y sub 2 is 6, the value of y sub 1 is 1. So, performing the operation, we have 3 minus the quantity of negative 2 squared plus the quantity of 6 minus 1 squared. The result is the square root of the quantity 5 squared plus the quantity of 5 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawang to, we have the square root of 25 plus 25. So, i-add natin to. We have the square root of 50. So, let's simplify the square root of 50. The result is 5 times the square root of 2. Kasi nga, pag sinimplify ang 50 is 25 times 2. The square root of 25 is 5. So, the square root of 50 is equal to 5 times the square root of 2. So, nakuha na natin yung distance nitong CA. So, yung distance naman nitong AR ang kukunin natin. So, sa AR, we have the value of x sub 2 is 4, the value of x sub 1 is 3, the value of y sub 2 is negative 1, and the value of y sub 1 is 6. So, performing again the operation, we have the square root of the quantity of 1 squared plus the quantity of negative 7 squared. So, pag in-squared natin ulit itong dalawa, we have the square root of 1 plus 49. So, let's add this. We have the square root of 50. So, pag sinimplify natin ulit ito, we have the results of 5 times the square root of 2. So, parehas yung dalawa. Yung CA and the AR. So, dalawa pa yung kailangan nating makuha. So, let's come to the other one. So, sa RE, ito naman. So, the value of x sub 2 is negative 1. The value of x sub 1 is 4. Then, the value of y sub 2 is negative 6. And the value of y sub 1 is negative 1. So, pag pinperform natin itong operations, we have the square root of the quantity of negative 1 minus 4 squared plus the quantity of negative 6 minus the quantity of negative 1 squared. We have the results of the square root of the quantity negative 5 squared plus the quantity of negative 5 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the results of the square root of 25 plus 25. Pag in-add natin to, we have the square root of 50. So, pag sinimplify natin itong the square root of 50, we have 5 times the square root of 2. So, same ulit siya dun sa sukat ng CA and AR. So, isa na lang yung kailangan nating ma-solve. And ito yung distance ng EC. So, sa EC, ito naman, we have the value of x sub 2 is negative 2. The value of x sub 1 is negative 1. Then, the value of y sub 2 is 1. And yung value ng y sub 1 is negative 6. So, perform the operations. We have the square root of the quantity of negative 2 minus the quantity of negative 1 squared plus the quantity of 1 minus the quantity of negative 6 squared. We have the results of the square root of the quantity negative 1 squared plus the quantity of 7 squared. So, pag in-squared natin itong dalawa, we have the results of the square root of 1 plus 49. So, let's add again itong dalawa. 1 plus 49. So, the result is the square root of 50. Pag sinimplify natin ito, we have 5 times the square root of 2. Hence, the distance of CA equals AR equals RE equals EC. So, it implies that CA is congruent to AR. So, to AR, which is also congruent to RE and congruent to AC. So, hence, CARE or the quadrilateral CARE is a rhombus because all sides are congruent. So, that's all for this video lesson. I hope may matutunan ulit kayo by watching this video about proving geometric properties using distance formula. Once again, I am Lilibet Tisepnay, a student teacher taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Mathematics of Holy Trinity College of Camarines Sur. God bless us. Bye-bye.